3 Democrats and 28 Republicans joined Congressman at the time, Tom Campbell, who now is a constitutional law professor at Stanford University. We went to the federal courts by saying that the president had bypassed Congress, and the courts did not take the lawsuit because they said, well, you in Congress have the authority to cut the budgets. And I mentioned that, Alex, because that's always difficult for members to cut the funding for war because they don't want to leave the kids over there without adequate equipment. And then when Mr. Obama went into Libya and he bypassed Congress, except he did say that he has spoken to the leadership, well, that made me even more anxious. I joined Dennis Kucinich and Jonathan Turley, who's a constitutional lawyer at George Washington University. We went back to the courts. The courts did not accept by using the same position where you have the authority to cut the funding. Well, that never happens. I've been so anxious and upset that we in Congress, we never get a chance to debate the policy of should we still be in war or not in war. So I decided to put this House Concurrent Resolution 107 in before I even knew about Secretary Sessions, Senator Sessions and Secretary of Defense Panetta. And I would like to read 2 quotes that I think give so much credibility to what we're trying to do with this resolution. One is from Vice President Dick Cheney. When we went into Iraq, which was an unnecessary war, I came out against it. And Vice President Cheney made the statement that I want to read to your listeners. The president does not need authorization from Congress before launching a military offensive. That was Dick Cheney during the President George Bush administration. Now let me read to you a candidate, Senator Obama, in 2007, and these are his words. The president does not have power under the Constitution to unilaterally authorize a military attack in a situation that does not involve stopping an actual immediate threat to the nation. That's exactly what I'm saying with this resolution. If we are attacked, then the president does have the authority based on the Constitution. But he does not have the constitutional power just to make a decision, well, I don't like the dictator in Libya, so we're going to go there and bomb him. I mean, we need to go back to the Constitution, and this will help Congress be more involved in the debate when we go to war.
Well said, Congressman. Of course, Senator Sessions said that he almost lost his breath whenever he kept saying to Panetta over and over again, the Secretary of Defense last week, sir, you know Congress is over the war powers, and you do need our authorization. And Panetta would say, no, we get that from the UN. So for me, this is beyond the constitutional question of a president launching wars without congressional approval. We know that's a high crime. It's in the Constitution. A 5-year-old that can read can see that. That's a no-brainer, because why even have Congress if that's the case? If the president can do whatever he wants, you've got to have checks and balances. But to go further and say we're getting the authority from foreign governments in the UN, I mean, that's like being a foreign agent of a foreign power, sir.
Alex, it is not acceptable. We have a Constitution like we have a Bible, and the Constitution says that Congress will declare war. That is why I've been so upset, and I mentioned to you just a moment ago my history on this whole issue that went back to President Clinton in Bosnia in 1999. For too long, Congress has been a spectator in the debate on war. And when you see the amount of money that we spend, and more important than the money, the number of kids who had died and lost their legs, their arms, the American people should get behind. And I'm pleased to tell you today, I was honored to be on your show, that we have had calls since Friday of last week that we have heard from people in 49 different states who have called and said, thank you, Congressman Jones. We want to help you get this resolution to the floor of the House and get this thing passed. And I want to thank you again for this opportunity.
Well, I want to thank you, sir. Now, he's already launched the Libya war last year, and Congress said, you got to get our approval. By the way, we're for it. The majority said, just come to us. And Obama put that letter out, as you know, sir, because I saw you speak about it at the time, saying, I don't need you. I don't have to look at the constitutional question. It was a quote on TV, but his letter said it. I have the UN, and I'm doing this for their credibility. That's a quote. So he's saying, I'm stating and setting the precedent that the UN's the boss. The Congress has been handing over its authority, but still doesn't mean that it's legitimate. And I'm not criticizing what you've done. It's measured. You know, you're saying, hey, do it again, or if another president does it, period, we're going to start impeachment. But what about somebody like Ron Paul. Wouldn't that be a good constitutional move, but also a campaign move for, say, Ron Paul to try to introduce articles of impeachment for the Libya fiasco, which they now admit has been a disaster, and given al-Qaeda footholds in areas of Libya?
Well, I have publicly endorsed Ron Paul. I am a big supporter of Ron Paul's, and I do agree with him totally, and you made mention of this. We tried. What happened was our own Republican leadership, Alex, would not allow even a weak resolution to condemn what the president had done in Libya. He wouldn't even allow Republicans to bring it to the floor. I was so disappointed in our leadership, Republican leadership, because they just sat back, and like I was saying a while ago, they became spectators. We have got to fight to defend the constitutional right of the Congress to declare war, and this is a step in that direction. We will get a hearing, I hope, in the Judiciary Committee. I know that the Judiciary Committee, chaired by Congressman Lamar Smith from Texas, who's a fine man, and the ranking member, who's a fine man, John Conyers. And we need to hold a hearing on this whole issue of Congress and war. And this is a start. This resolution is a major step in that direction.
Well said, Congressman. What can we do to help move this legislation through the House and get it passed?
If your listeners would call them members of the United States House of Representatives, and I hope soon we'll have a Senate senator to introduce the same legislation. But right now, if your listeners would call them members of Congress and say, please co-sponsor H-Con Resolution 107. All they have to do is to call their member of Congress or email them or fax them and just say, please join in this House effort to bring back the constitutional authority of Congress to be involved when it comes to debating war. And that's what they need to do. And I can honestly tell you, we had a person yesterday, I was in the Greenville office, Greenville, North Carolina, and a gentleman called from Colorado and said, what can I do to help Congressman Jones with this H-Con resolution, 107. And we told him, just call your member of Congress, ask them to join, call the J Committee in Washington, D.C., and say this is a constitutional debate that needs to start. And H-Con Resolution 107 will start the debate.
Again, we're talking to Congressman Walter Jones of North Carolina, and I'm glad people are calling and thanking him, but I think what's more important is to call the head of the Judiciary Committee to ask them to get behind it and start promoting it, to call the media and say, don't black this out, and to call people like Senator Rand Paul and say, look, you've talked a lot about this war power issue. Your father has. You need to co-sponsor this immediately in the Senate. I would imagine that Senator DeMint would want to get behind this. I would imagine that Senator Sessions, who was so flabbergasted, Congressman, would want to get behind this right now.
Well, I'm going to reach out to him Monday. We will be back in Washington. I've already asked my staff to call his office to see if he could give me 10 minutes by telephone. I think he will see the value of trying to introduce this on the Senate side, and let's debate this issue. It is time for Congress to get out of the stands and get on the field when we talk about sending our young men and women to die.
What are folks saying in North Carolina, especially in your district, the 3rd District?
Alex, I don't want to mislead anything. I'm a man of integrity and honesty, and I will tell you that the phones, the emails have been overwhelming in behalf of this legislation.
So, well, that's what I've seen. Now, what about the semi-blackout? Drudge Report covered it. I've covered it. Infowars.com covered it. WorldNet Daily covered it. I do a search every day. A few local newspapers in North Carolina mentioned it. Other than that, nothing. Nothing. You would think that a law to begin impeaching any president who tries to power grab like this, that a move towards that could lead to impeachment, that would be huge news. And you can tell they're scared of this because there's been such a blackout. How do we force this issue out there?
Alex, I think letters to the editors or emails to the national papers or local papers. My local paper, they did an editorial that they did not understand that we had changed the word "the president," which means only Obama, to a president, and they wrote an editorial. It was not overly critical, but it just did not understand the intent. I called the editor, who's a very nice young man, and I said, I wish you'd call me before you did the editorial, because you would understand that this deals primarily with getting Congress back into the debate. I am sick and tired of being told, well, the only time you can debate whether we should be or not be in Afghanistan is when we have the appropriations bill dealing with funding the war.
Yeah, I'm going to be... Sure.
Excuse me.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead. I interrupted you.
No. We should have the authority to have, when President Obama is saying, well, you gave President Bush the authority in 2001 or 2002, and that's the authority I'm using. For goodness sakes, 11 years later, we shouldn't be debating whether we should be there or not be there sometime in that 11-year period of time. So this is a start on that whole debate, quite frankly.
Well, Congressman, we've only got about 5 minutes left with you, and you've got to run. We just appreciate what you're doing. My question is, why don't we see more people? Why is it just you, Ron Paul, Dennis Kucinich, got redistricted out of his constituency, railroaded out, and so there's not many people that'll just stand for the basic Constitution. For those that don't know history, it happens in third world countries. It happened in Rome with Caesar. When a president or a leader, the chief executive, starts trying to take the military under their own control, that's always the biggest red flag. As you said in your letter dealing with this, the cornerstone of our republic is the war powers, is that the Congress is in control of this, and this is one of the biggest issues out there.
Well, Alex, our country is financially broke. We're just the young men and women that have fought for this country in Afghanistan and Iraq. I've seen the broken legs. I've seen the amputated legs. I've seen the paralyzed bodies. The American people need to say that we no longer will send our young men and women to fight overseas unless Congress does its job that is based on the Constitution. And again, HCON Resolution 107 is a start to get Congress back into the game of war.
Well said. Look, I'm not trying to tell Ron Paul, sir, what to do, and I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but what about if this gets ignored, just going ahead because the crime is ongoing? Now they want to send AFRICOM into all these countries for the globalists to grab resources. They're trying to expand all these other wars, proxy wars. What about just going ahead with a move for impeachment? Perhaps if they're ignoring a law that says if you don't do this, impeachment's triggered, what about just going ahead with the impeachment? I mean, why doesn't Ron Paul just go ahead and introduce articles of impeachment? We've got plenty of it to go after Obama. And I understand you're saying any president, but I don't care if it's political. I mean, I know you were critical of this when Republicans were doing things similar, but not rising to this level.
Well, Alex, I think if people like you across this nation will continue to beat the drum for HCON Resolution 107, I think this will lead to other avenues that need to be led to that you're making mention of. But right now, to show that my leadership in the Republican House, we are the majority in the House, they need to be speaking out about bringing this bill to the J Committee because it's important, because we're talking about the Constitution. I'm with you 100%.
Well, Congressman, I want to give you closing comments here in the last 3 minutes or so, but just bring up another issue that's part of this, the National Defense Authorization Act that Obama said he wouldn't sign. Then it turns out he demanded this power to secretly arrest and disappear Americans right out of Nazi Germany or Soviet Russia. Then he signed it, on New Year's Eve, so nobody would notice. I mean, this is really creepy. What's the sense of Congress about this?
Well, Alex, I think I don't have